And 48 degrees in downtown Seattle. I'm Ursula Royteen.
From Kent to Capitol Hill, this is KIRO Radio, 97.3 FM. News and talk, powered by the Pacific Northwest.
The Dori Monson Show on KIRO Radio. This is The Big Lead.
Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio and streaming on Facebook Live. Welcome. Welcome to The Big Show. And Ursula, I just have one question.
Yes.
When? When are our politicians going to learn that to ignore us turns me into like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction?
It's so true. Better to come on the show.
Come on.
Yeah.
Answer our questions, and we'll be done with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we move on.
Because otherwise you kind of almost become obsessed.
Well, because I believe that if people try to not come on and answer questions when they're in politics and when they've talked about transparency, it makes me wonder if they have something to hide. And so I've spent a lot of the weekend following up on the exclusive story that we broke on Friday about the new Seattle Director of Transportation. And I'll get to it in a couple of minutes here. But my advice to all politicians and political figures, if you come on, answer questions, generally we're done with it after that. Then we were satisfied. Maybe I won't like or agree with the answers, but generally there's nothing more to do with the story when you've come on and answered things. But when you don't do that, it truly does make me wonder if you have something to hide. And it continues to appear that the new Seattle DOT director changed his name about 10 years ago. And the more that I've found out about this over the weekend, the more legitimate questions. And when their communications people say there's a personal matter that's unrelated to his job, no, it's not. And I'll explain all of the legitimate questions that we would ask the guy if he'll come on with us. So I'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. But we have a lot of other news to talk about as well. Let's get right to the big lead.
The Big Lead. Top story.
Today's social media freak out du jour. It's amazing how these things burn so bright and hot for a day or two, and then, poof, it's gone. Remember, it was a week ago Friday. Trump told Cohen to lie to Congress. Trump's going to be impeached over this. And that lasted for a few hours, and then Mueller came out. It was fake news. And then a week ago, it was the Covington Catholic High School kids and the showdown with the Native American. Everybody in the country was freaking out over that one. And now it's pretty much background noise at best today, just a week later from when that story first broke. And on it goes. We have a local business up in Edmonds that is in the center of today's freak out du jour. Edmonds Bakery, nice little bakery. I've been there. It had a Valentine cookie assortment that they were putting out. I'm a little disappointed because the owner of the bakery said he was going to come on with us right now, but now because of how toxic this topic has become, he wants to just avoid it and not come on. But his name is Ken Bellingham, and among these assortment of cookies, they just made a bunch of cookies and they put little words on them. One of them was cool beans. Another, addicted to love. Another cookie, believe. Another cookie, build that wall. Huh? Build that wall? Well, one of the customers, a woman named Anna Carrera, she talked to King 5 up at their website, king5.com. And, well, first she described to King 5 the cookie.
This is the photograph that I took of the cookies, specifically the one that says, build that wall.
Okay. And so Everybody in America has to be offended over everything.
We were born here, but my parents were the stories that you see on the news of people crossing the border just because they want to have a new start.
Okay. And we allow 1 million people to cross the border legally and legally immigrate to this country every year. And in fact, by the way, I want you to be listening at 1:30 this afternoon. Well, I want you to listen all the time, every day. But at 1:30 this afternoon, I'm going to talk to a man named David Rubin, and he was the mayor of Shiloh, Israel. And he will give us some stats on what happened after they built a southern border wall in Israel. And the numbers are absolutely mind-blowing. The wall has worked extraordinarily well in Israel. And instead of just playing politics and I love it because I love Trump, I hate it because I hate Trump, how about, does it work? Will it help with the problems on our southern border? So anyway, this woman's offended because a cookie said build the wall, and this is what she puts into that cookie herself.
You say something with enough hate, you chant it, you have white supremacists, the alt-right chanting it, it's going to become racial.
She's just ridiculous. It's racial in her mind. It's racial in her mind. Building a wall is something that an awful lot of Americans support because it would cut down on drugs, because it would cut down on illegals, because it would cut down on the women who are getting raped as they're being sex trafficked across the border.
But putting on a cookie, I mean, we heard from the baker who says, I was just trying to be funny.
I'm going to play
some of his
him too.
Funny?
So what?
And to be clear, some of his cookies have like scandalous things on them. Some of them are written like sexual. Some of them are written like he does funny cookies. That's his thing.
Yeah. So this woman has the hate in her head and just taking words on a cookie and translating that into people who support a wall, many of whom support it for very legitimate reasons. So
but whether you put it on, whether you support it, it's a whole different thing when you're putting it on something where you're trying to invite all customers into your bakery.
So don't eat at that bakery anymore then, if you're her.
Well, and I guess that's her.
Instead, this guy's going through hell now because a bunch of people on the left are just sending him hateful messages, and somebody went by the business and put up some flyers that it should be boycotted, and all because a woman can't handle a couple of words on a cookie. It's just it's insanity. Here's the owner of the bakery, Ken Bellingham.
I did it as a joke, but it was really taken out of context, and it's not anything that I endorse. I don't think building a wall is going to solve our problem.
This poor guy. I mean, I don't know what was in his heart when he put that on, but neither does this Anna woman either.
Some are a little risque, some are nice. I just try to be funny. People were just going off like they don't know anything about me. Yeah, right. And yet I was, supposedly this horrible person.
Oh, no, Anna knows about you. You're filled with hate, and your business should be boycotted, and you should be destroyed financially, and this man shouldn't be able to have a livelihood now because he put 3 words on a cookie. And he says the backlash from the left.
This was on my front door this morning. It says, "Stop the hate," but this is more hateful than this could ever be.
And that's the key point here. Whatever he put on the hate on the cookie that's described as hateful, the response is 1,000 times more toxic and hateful. And that's the irony of the compassionate people, the people who get so triggered by stuff like that. So all of that audio is from king5.com. So again, I wish he'd come on with us, but he just told us a few minutes ago that it's become too toxic. This guy's life is upside down because he put 3 words on a cookie. And people can't handle words on a cookie these days, which is another indication that there are a lot of really pathetic people in this country today. Next up, in the Big Lead.
The Big Lead, Dori Monson Show exclusive.
So, Nicole, where are we? Did you extend another invitation to Sam Zimbabwe on Friday to come on today?
Yes, I called on Friday, and then I sent another email this morning, and I haven't heard anything back.
Okay. This is a story, if you weren't listening on Friday, this is a story that we broke, an exclusive, thanks to one of our listeners, who, by the way, has been a really good tipster for me in the past as well. So when I saw that it was from this particular listener, I thought, well, I'll at least look into this. So Sam Zimbabwe was just named the Seattle Department of Transportation director, the head guy for transportation in the city of Seattle. And what my listener told me was, did you know that Sam changed his last name somewhere between 2007 and 2011? He was, because we talked about this on Friday. I thought when I first heard his name is the new SDOT director, I just assumed he's probably an African-American guy. And then I saw him, and he's Caucasian. He's a Jewish fella. And he changed his last name sometime between 2007 and 2011. So we asked the DOT about it, and they said, that's very interesting. But it's a personal matter, and it's unrelated to his job, so we won't go into it. And the more I thought about this over the weekend, the more upsetting that response was. Because I think you and I, and remember, who was the first person in the media to tell you about Scott Kubley, his predecessor with the Seattle DOT? Who was the first person to call out how incompetent and ethically challenged Scott Kubley was? Well, it was our show. Because, again, that was a case where it wasn't a tip from a listener. It was somebody who sat in meetings with Scott Kubley, somebody that I trusted, somebody that I knew to be a real professional when it comes to issues like government and transportation. And they said, Dori, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy is so far over his head. And then we tracked when he ripped off the public for millions of dollars with the Prano bike scandal. And then lo and behold, when Kubley got bounced, he ends up with a bike share company, getting a big fat job with them. So my antenna's up a little bit. And I want to know, why would somebody change their name from Sam Zimmerman Bergman to Sam Zimbabwe? And what's particularly odd about this is I think that he did it because, Zimbabwe sounds cool. And in Seattle politics, in D.C., where he was before Seattle, sounding cool is way more important than being great. It's all about image. It's about what sounds good more than what's really being accomplished here. And so we started looking into it more over the weekend. Some people say, well, his wife also had a hyphenated last name, and they didn't want to go with the 4 hyphen, I guess it'd be 3 hyphens between 4 last names. She's Jessica Bidwell Wendover, and he's Sam Zimmerman Bergman. And they said, well, maybe they took Zim from Zimmerman and B from Bidwell, and the A, we have no idea where that came from. And another B in Bergman, and the W in Wen. I mean, it's just a ridiculous. The people who are supporting him, defending him, they're coming up with all of these weird stretches as to why they might have picked Zimbabwe. But what's even odder about this is at the time he apparently picked Zimbabwe as his made-up last name, Zimbabwe was being ruled by murderous dictator Robert Mugabe. Mugabe was cited for human rights violations. Zimbabwe was one of the worst countries in the world when it came to human rights violations. He maintained the revolutionary socialist rhetoric of the Cold War. He blamed Zimbabwe's economic woes on capitalism in the West. Whoa! Well, that's certainly consistent with Seattle politics, where we have Marxists, literal Marxists, on the city council whose stated desire is to tear down our city and rebuild it with socialist Marxist principles, which is what they did under the murderous regime of Mugabe. But here's what's even stranger about this. One of the first stories that popped up when I was doing some research, why would somebody pick Zimbabwe as their last name? I know it sounds cool, and I know to climb the liberal political ladder in D.C. and Seattle, sounding cool is a big deal. So one of the first stories that popped up this weekend, and this is just weird, getting around the city with kids when formal transit has collapsed. And it was a story from citylab.com that said Zimbabwe once had a functional, even robust urban transit system. A well-connected and functional transportation system was one of the many elements that made Zimbabwe a jewel. In the years of political upheaval since, that system has become a mere mockery of its old self. The whistles of the trains that ferried urban locals from one point to the other have long been silent. The public trains, once operated by the National Railway, no longer run. Even the formal public bus system no longer exists. And the roads that once carried those buses are deteriorating and difficult to navigate. That dilapidation carries a heavy cost, particularly for women, and has affected how they travel within and around the city with their children and babies. Issues that are compounded by class and inequality. And then it talks about how sexual harassment and crime is so prevalent in what exists, what's left over of a transit system in what used to be a very functional country. That's what you pick as your made-up random last name? Zimbabwe? You want to be a DOT director here in Seattle, and you gave yourself a last name. You changed it as an adult, which I still want to know why. My tipster found that under his previous name, there may have been some liens against him, which I would love to ask him about that if we do get him on. We're looking into that. But I just want to know, why would you, if you could pick any name in the world, why would you pick one that was being run, of a nation that was being run by a murderous dictator and had a transit system that had completely collapsed? Those are some of the questions that I would ask Sam Zimbabwe, the new Seattle Department of Transportation Director. If he comes on with us, we'll continue to try to get him on, and then we'll be done with it if he comes on. Or we can just keep looking into this more and more and more, because I'll still ask the questions, even if he won't provide the answers here. That is your big lead this hour.
The Big Lead on KIRO Radio.
It's Super Bowl week, and Brock Heward is going to drop by, the Monday Monson quarterback. I had a lot to talk with Brock about. He looks good, looks tan. Find out all about what's going on in that young man's life. Brock Heward joins us next as we get rolling here on the Dori Monson Show.